Thursday, May 14th, 2026, we have a really interesting Mercury Cazimi, which is what we call it when a planet makes an exact conjunction to the sun. And this year, Mercury in Taurus, having an intimate conversation with the sun, with the king, getting powered up. This is how the ancients saw this particular synodic cycle, has a particular strong numinous energy to it because it's the first Mercury conjunction with the sun that we've had in Taurus in 7 years without Uranus co-present. So there may be a deeper reckoning or an insight, particularly around grief, that we are left with as a gift, really, in a way, from Uranus in the wake of his departure into Gemini. Because this is not just Mercury and the Sun together, but they are also co-joined and conjunct by the goddess asteroid Ceres. Hi, I'm Amy Rose White. I'm an integrative psychotherapist and astrologer making videos on concrete self-healing tools for astrological transit. Thank you so much for liking, hyping, and subscribing. Please be sure to see the description below for my website links to free resources. Now, as you may know from one of my recent videos, Ceres is the goddess of wheat, agriculture, corn, and later really the seasonal changes, and mother to Persephone, who was taken on the underworld journey. See my Pluto retrograde video here. And the Ceres archetype is often associated with loss and grieving of children because she quite literally lost her daughter to Pluto and to the underworld. And so this grief in our own lives can be actual loss to death of children in our lives, or maybe an illness, stillbirth, or simply the transitions from one developmental stage to another in our children's lives. You know, like from no longer being a baby to being a school-age child, all the way to becoming an empty nester, so to speak, with a child moving away from home and really beginning their own adult life. What's especially interesting to remember is that this Cazimi, Mercury conjunct the Sun with Ceres, is happening just 2 days before a new moon in Taurus. And that new moon is just 1 or 2 degrees away from where the Cazimi is occurring. And for that reason, because that new moon is very powerful, and I'll talk about that in my next video, I think it's a moment where we're more likely to feel embodied. That is what Taurus is all about, the earthly, sensual realities and what we can touch, taste, and smell, even if that is pain in our own bodies and psyches around transitions and loss and the acceptance that is part of grief, even if it changes us, and as it does, change us forever. Ceres made that deal with Pluto, that her daughter could return, but only for half of the year, thus giving us the darker fall and winter times where Ceres retreated so much into her grief that the fields lay fallow. And there are fallow grieving times in our life, and they're necessary, especially with really catastrophic loss, whether that's a relationship that was deeply meaningful to you, or loss of a child, or even just of an old life that you thought would never change or would be created at some time in the future, and it never did. The new moon in Taurus is a real signal of healing and moving forward. I'll be putting out that special video all about that one in a couple days. So when planets are within 15 degrees of the sun, as they get closer and closer, as Mercury's been doing the last couple weeks, we think of them as an inferior or weakened state, either under the beams or combust in ancient astrology terms. But once they're in the conjunction, it's sort of like taking a long journey to a castle to see a great teacher or leader, or the king, literally the sun. And you barely make it there because you've been on this really long trek and you're getting weak and it's getting hotter and hotter. And as you get closer, you run out of food and you're starting to run low on water. But once you finally make it and you're there in the presence of that essence of life, that omnipresent power of the sun, where the planet gets reinvigorated, you suddenly come back to life. You suddenly are in that divine healing presence, and all of your cares and worries and physical needs go away. So one of the reasons that grieving loss is around children and parenting, the Ceres story, including our own inner child, whether you have children or not, that's very likely to be coming up right now, but in a way that allows us to start fresh and new with the stories, Mercury, that we tell ourselves about those losses. Almost every day I sit with clients who are really heartbroken that the children that they have are growing up and changing. even if they haven't had to go through an actual physical loss, or perhaps they have a child that's gotten a significant health diagnosis, a mental health diagnosis, or a neurodivergent label. And suddenly the stories and fantasies that they had built up around that child are confronted with the reality that that is not how it's going to unfold. So prolonged pain, or what we would call complicated or prolonged grief, often comes from an adherence to those stories and a conscious or unconscious retelling ourselves this mental chatter, this looping that we can't handle the loss of that story that we've held on to. And I am not trying to minimize the loss of a child. By the way, that is, of course, every mother and father's greatest fear. But when we cannot function, it is often due to that repeated story of, I can't handle this and there is no way to survive it. Because we're releasing not just what is the current reality, but the possibilities that we believed might lie in the future. It's especially true when we have birth trauma, or when we have a child with a NICU stay or hospital stay of any age, when our child has an accident that changes their capacity or need, or even a temporary kind of a surgery that has a long recovery. And of course, if a child has a disability or becomes alter-abled in any way, these stories are so challenged, they're ripped away from us. And basically our journey as parents is fundamentally altered, not only because of the obvious physical tasks that are created when a child has special needs or even disturbing experiences, let's say severe bullying and needs to change schools, as just a lighter example, although very significant. We're just constantly up against what needs to happen next for our children's well-being. That is not what we planned for, but what actually needs to happen next for our survival too, especially in the event of child loss or separation, or again, even just those normal developmental progressions. So what we do now and how grief can empower us versus cripple us is really the function of the story that we are telling ourselves. And that's what this Mercury Cazimi with series is powerfully inviting us to reflect on this week. When it comes to our own inner child losses, which are also coming up at this time because of all the things that have happened to us that we have no control over in our childhood, that remain somatic body memories, and conscious or unconscious memories that go through our heads, often running our lives, without us really being aware of it. And so in the sign of Taurus, right before this Taurus new moon, practices that keep us in the body, the practice of saying no story, no story, no story. I'm going to notice what's happening in my physical body. I'm going to check in. I'm going to take deep breaths. I'm going to put my hand on my chest. I'm going to take 2 minutes a day to notice what's happening in my jaw, in around my heart, around my eyes. Is there anger? Is there sadness? Is there frustration, disappointment? Is there bewilderment? Is there a feeling that I'm holding back that I could invite forward? Can I shake that? Not out of the body, but with my body? Can I make a vocalization with what I'm noticing? Low guttural tones are really helpful with this. Even humming. Like a lot of people feel weird when they do these kinds of exercises, but it's very powerful to use our voice, our movement that's not pretty or choreographed or performative in any way, but really to listen to the body and allow sound, movement, and touch, holding ourselves, rocking ourselves. This is what we do with grief. This is how we take the small things from your child getting their driver's license and realizing that now they're going to be out on the road and they don't need you as much, all the way to something devastating as losing custody of a child. And this is a very good time to do those exercises and spend extra attention with the younger parts of ourselves that needed validation, attention, and witnessing around disappointments and their own unseen losses. Maybe no one ever talked about grandma or sister or brother after they died or moved away. Maybe you were expected the stories and the expectations around grief were that we don't speak about that person again, or we just move on, or the focus is on maybe the mom or the dad or grandma or grandpa, but as a child, it's assumed that it's not that big of a deal to you because you're little. So you're likely to be tuned in right now to grief experiences that you carried alone as a child, and perhaps no one was aware of, or just simply didn't have the appropriate attuned adult responses to you at that time. So this may be simple as noticing where in your life a younger version of you would be so proud to see what you've endured, what you've accomplished, the kind of person that you've become now, and celebrate with her. Doesn't have to be all, pain and sobbing and flailing, although that can definitely be part of grief work. Sometimes I'll look at my own inner children, I visualize them, or I'll look at pictures. I've got lots of pictures of me as a young child, and I'll simply say, we did it. Look what we did together. We're doing so great. I love you. Thank you so much for hanging in there with me. I'm here to take care of you. I'm so proud of you. All the fortitude that you had to master back then has turned into something so beautiful that you can offer others. Things like that. In this way, we can come out on the other side of this new moon and how it unfolds in the next 6 months in a different relationship to grief in the body, no matter what it's about. So the meditation for this transit, the entire week, is where have I been trapped in grief because of the story I've been telling myself? It's just something to consider and reflect on. You can write it, you can just think about it, you can ask the question before you go to bed. The mirror work is looking into your own left eye, deep breath, kind eyes only. I see the courage it takes to release the fantasy of what was supposed to happen. And your mantra to use for Mercury Cazimi series. And your mantra to use for Mercury series Cazimi is, I allow grief to open me fully instead of collapsing. I hope this is helpful for you. Let us know in the comments. Thank you so much to those of you that have been taking the time to comment, sharing your healing journeys with us, and inspiring others. It is deeply appreciated by me, every single one of them. Check out these videos below and my free resources linked to my website down in the description, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, bye for now.